All right, are we good to go?
We are good to go.
Okay. All right, I can hear you guys again. All right. So going over the agenda, the first thing we'll need to do is to welcome and call to order. We're doing a roll call. Tori, do you do that or should I do that?
I'll do that. Okay, Samantha Ross, excused. Jeremy Mackay.
Here.
John Hannum. Aye. Thomas Crozier. Yep. Zachary Fisher. He will be joining us also on Zoom, I think, so we'll see him probably later. Douglas Meltzer. Here. Ashley Morey.
Here.
Greg Sharp. Here. And Quorum.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Tori. Next, do we have an approval of the agenda for today? Has everyone had a chance to look over it?
I'm thinking about to do a reading.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Agenda's been approved. How about the minutes? Have you guys been able to look at last month's minutes?
We're having a hard time hearing you, Jeremy, so we're gonna see if it's the computer that needs to turn up.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Perfect. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, any opposed?
Thank you.
All right, the ayes have it. All right, great. So now this is a section where we get into public comment. Now, Tori, how do we run something like this?
So there's the option, it's a in-person meeting, so typically if they had something, public comment, they'd show up for your meeting. They can submit it in writing too, haven't received anything, so no public comment.
Okay, no public comment. That makes it easy. All right, we'll move ahead. Let's get into action items. It looks like there's none on that. Man, this is the easiest meeting I've had to do in a while. This is great. I really appreciate you guys. All right, agenda item 6 out of 7, discussion items. So it sounds like the first thing that we'd be getting into is the revenue update from the city manager. After that, we'll do a clutch development with Chris Blackburn. Bassett Street Northwest status information from Jennifer Martin is after that. The latest from West Salem organizations will be one of the last things we have on here, and then next meeting topics. Sounds like a great plan. Should we start with the revenue update from city manager Keith Stolley?
Hey, thank you, Jeremy. Keith Staley, city manager for the city of Salem. Nice to meet you all. It would be really helpful for me if we could go around the room and just introduce ourselves. I don't know any of you, so it's nice to meet you, but it'd also be nice to understand where you're coming from, who you're representing, or what your business interest is. And good morning, Councilor Varney. Good to see you also. So
morning.
Jeremy, where do you hail from? What do you do?
So I'm a resident of West Salem, and then my wife and I own the West Salem Ace Hardware and the new East Salem Ace Hardware on Lancaster.
All right, thank you.
My name is Tom Crozier. I'm a teacher in the Salem High School District, and I live in West Salem. I'm a West Salem resident.
Ashley Morey, I work at Salem Electric. Working for the members up front.
I work for Goodwill Industries. I oversee Goodwill's territory including the West Salem.
Working for City of Salem, Redevelopment project manager.
Greg Sharp, I also work at Salem Electric and Salem.
Doug Meltzer, business owner, and live just outside of West Salem. I have a history living in West Salem in the past.
What business do you own, Doug?
MSc engineer, so it's over state. Small engineering firm.
Nice to meet you. So, thanks for spending a few minutes with me this morning and giving me an opportunity to talk about where the city is from a budget perspective. Last week, we kicked off our 2026 budget process. The city's budget is named after the year it ends in. So looking ahead, we will be adopting our 2026 budget on July 1st of 2025. It runs from July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2026. And we're starting to think about, okay, what does our next year's budget look like? We delivered a 5-year financial forecast to the budget committee last week. And you know, I was not surprised by the results of that forecast. And obviously, I'm pretty deeply engaged in this. And you can push to share the screen.
Okay.
Linda, thank you. So our budget is not in a good position, and we're going to have to make some very difficult decisions about our revenues and expenses, decisions that will involve either significantly cutting our expenses, and of course, for the city, 85% of our expenses are humans. So that would mean a reduction in our workforce, or we're going to have to ask the community for some new revenues, or we're going to have to do some combination thereof. So I just want an opportunity to share this with our boards and commissions as we start working our way through this budget process. If you pay attention to the Salem Reporter or the Statesman Journal, you'll see a lot of articles and I just want to have the opportunity to spend a few minutes with our boards and commissions explaining where we are and where we need to go over the next few months here. So next slide. So one of the things that you'll hear is, well, this is obviously just a mismanagement problem, and it's not a mismanagement problem. I will reject that characterization of our budget problem pretty strongly. We are among all of the municipalities in the state of Oregon. We are constrained because of measures 5 and 50, which were adopted in the 1990s, which were specifically intended to limit the size and scope of local government by limiting the amount that our ad valorem tax revenues can grow to 3% per year. And in our business, 3% is a very constrained business environment. Our cost of labor and our cost for electricity and for other services and benefits and the like has grown well beyond 3% per year. So we're constantly in the mode of having to cut and having to reduce the scope of our services, as are most municipalities and counties in the state of Oregon. Looking up and down the I-5 corridor, there are very few communities. West Lynn, perhaps, Lake Oswego, a few, very high-end communities with very limited services, and small governments are doing okay. The rest of us are kind of struggling. And as you can see here, a variety of different approaches proposed last night. Independence, their $5.9 million levy failed. It failed by 60 to 40 in that range, so it failed pretty significantly. So next slide. So this was the slide that our CFO, or Chief Financial Officer, presented to the Budget Committee last week. A lot of information on here. The green line is our fund balance. Our fund balance policy says that we need to maintain 15% of our revenues in our fund balance to allow us basically to continue to pay our bill going forward. And as you can see here in 2026, the fund balance starts to drop below our fund balance policy, which is that 15% that I referred to. And we're looking at about a $17.69 million budget shortfall out of a general fund budget that's about $180 million. So basically a 10% shortfall there. As I said, the majority of our expenses are related to humans. Humans like firefighters, police officers, parks and recreation employees, librarians, HR, and all of the other humans that support our direct service delivery. And as you can see on the chart here, as we move out into 27, 28, 29, and 30, which is the entire duration of our 5-year forecast, that forecast doesn't improve. There's nothing there that's going to change our outlook unless we change either our revenues or expenses. We're not anticipating any windfalls. We were able to not have this conversation 2 years ago, 3 years ago, because of the ARPA dollars that were infused into local governments in 2020 and 2021. We received about $37 million in ARPA funds, 17 of which went into the general fund as sort of a revenue stabilization. So that helped us over the last few years sort of forestall this conversation. Those funds have been, completely expended at this point, and now we're forced to have this conversation with our community about, are we going to raise revenues, or are we going to cut expenses, or are we going to try and do something in between? So, what we've learned over the last year is, last November, we failed a payroll tax pretty miserably. That wasn't just a knee-jerk response to the situation. City Council deliberated that very seriously. They recognized the situation that we were in, and the $17.69 million shortfall that we have, and they put the payroll tax forward as a means of addressing that. Obviously, it failed. We learned from our community that they want to be involved in this conversation, so here I am. I've been in front of boards and commissions and neighborhood associations talking about this information pretty regularly. We learned in our budget process last year that cutting anything out of the budget is really hard. There isn't anything in our budget where people sort of universally say, I'm really just not interested in splash pads or movies in the park or cultural programming down at Riverfront Park or maintaining our parks on a regular basis, or keeping the library open more than it is right now. So City Council ended up putting $1 million back into our budget. They used basically the last of our available ARP funds, and they put that $1 million back into our budget. We were able to forestall $1 million in cuts from our 2025 budget, but we took almost $4 million out of other programs and services. Yeah, sure.
Then don't do it, but the revenues have grown about 1.25% in the forecast between 25 and 26. And with that not being closer to 3, I'm sure there's a reason for that. 3%.
Our revenues typically grow right around 4% in total. And our expenses typically grow right around 5% in total. So constantly have that tension between our revenues and our expenses. We went through a revenue task force, started in January, ended in June. They made some recommendations to City Council, and lo and behold, there wasn't any like magic. There was nothing like, oh wow, we just never knew about that particular revenue source. why don't we try that? Lots of comfort around payment in lieu of taxes, basically going to the state government and saying, hey, we need you to give us, dollars for the services that the city renders to the state capitol. We back them up from a law enforcement perspective, but we entirely are at their disposal for our EMS and fire response. The state does not have a fire company that supports any of the Capitol campus. So we're 100% responsible for that, and they do not compensate us in any way for that. In Olympia, where I was the assistant city manager, we had a payment in lieu of taxes agreement with the Department of Enterprise Services there. They funded the city of Olympia $1.7 million when I left, and I suspect it's probably $2 million now, given inflation and whatnot. So that seems like a very fair thing to do, and we'll be working to get the legislature's attention. And the governor said that she would sign a bill if it's to her desk, but there's the House and the Senate that have to concur on that and send her a bill. Community survey, a couple weeks ago, we presented the results of a community survey. And our consultant, BHM, phoned up 400 residents in the city of Salem, statistically representative of all of our community. And they basically said, we're really not interested in paying more taxes. 40% of them said we're absolutely not interested, and another 20% said we're probably not interested. So that obviously tells us something. Of the respondents and in the conversation, there was a strong preference for public safety, less strong for community services, library, parks, recreation, center 50 plus, and the like. The measure that seemed to be most likely to pass, and again, was a 43% support, was a 75% or 75 cent per thousand measure aimed at basically keeping the library whole. That, and 75 cents per thousand would generate about $10 million a year. So let's move to the next slide. Already been over the community survey. Let's go to the next slide. So just real quick, I'm going to run through these quickly. These are the principles as I'm preparing the budget that I'm using to sort of guide me and the organization as we consider our revenue and expenses. And of course, we're first off, we have to follow the law. In the state of Oregon and pretty much in across the country, you have to present a balanced budget. That means your revenues and your expenses must align, and they must be based on the reasonably likely scenarios to occur. We can't say, oh, we're magically going to pass a revenue measure, or mystically we're going to find some money in a desk drawer somewhere. It has to be based on reasonably foreseeable circumstances, and that's what we do. We do an annual five-year financial forecast. We look at what our costs of labor are going to be, and we estimate what our costs of materials and services are going to be, and we compile that all and project it out over 5 years, and that's how we come up with our budget forecast, and that's how we move our budget forward. So let's go to the next slide, Linda. We're going to try and stay focused on advancing our community's vision, which is articulated through our comprehensive plan and our transportation system plans and parks plans and the like. And this is a really hard thing for counselors and community members when people have great ideas. Hey, we still do this new program or service. Great, how are we going to pay for it? What is the new source of revenue, or what are we not going to do in order to pay for that? And number 4, at some point, as we're continuing to cut services and reduce staffing, it no longer makes sense for us to be in a particular business or offer a particular program. The police chief, for example, made a decision last month to eliminate our bicycle patrol in the 2025 operating year because he simply could no longer sustain that program. They had 3 people assigned to the program and 1 sergeant, and that wasn't enough to consistently put that program out on the streets in downtown. So he said, you know, it just doesn't make any sense anymore to try and do that. I'm going to repurpose those individuals into our patrol division where they can respond to 911 calls. It cuts down on the amount of proactive policing that we're able to do, but it also enhances our ability to respond to 911 calls and also to do basic things like traffic enforcement, which we had our 20th fatality yesterday over on Highway 22, just east of I-5. The individual left the road and struck a tree, and something's going on there. Last year we had 13 fatalities in total. So this year we've had 20 so far. We're going to use one-time revenues for one-time costs. We never want to be in a position where we're gambling on the future. Hey, we have $1 million left in ARPA funds. Let's put them into operating. That's a bad business decision, and we're gonna work to avoid that. Go to the next slide, Linda. We're going to continue to be good stewards of city tax dollars. As a city in Oregon, we're required to be audited every year. That's a full financial audit. We are also this year doing a validation of our 5-year forecast. We're hiring a third party to come in and review our 5-year forecast and test the assumptions that we use, and also look at the outcomes that we anticipate in that forecast to make sure that we're getting that reasonably right. We're going to focus on preserving our infrastructure. The last thing you want to do is you want to see your roads come unraveled. It's a lot easier to maintain things than it is to build new things. We constantly look for ways to increase our efficiency and our effectiveness, and we're doing a series of performance audits. Having our outside contractor, Moss Adams, they do organizational and accounting work for us, having them come in and do a performance audit on various services. We're going to continue to have conversations with the community. This, and also, if you look at our webpage, there's opportunities to comment right now. Literally click the link, pick survey. What do you think is important? The community survey was a method of doing that, and obviously the continued conversation with the budget committee. We're going to take care of our employees. We just signed a employee a labor contract with ASME literally last Monday night. We approved that. I signed it yesterday, and it treats our employees fairly. The reality is, that may mean that we have fewer employees at some point, and that's a hard decision. But we're making made the decision. We're going to continue to work to pay our employees at the market. Employee retention is important. We pay our police officers and firefighters at market. Also, using a police officer or firefighter is basically a $200,000 loss to us. And try to avoid that. And then finally, we're going to continue to have these conversations, engage our communities in a variety of different ways. So, City of Breckham, in 2023, they had a public safety levy on the ballot, and it failed. It failed 46 to 56. In 2024, in May of 2024, they put that levy back on the ballot, and they changed it a little bit. They reduced it from $1.50 per thousand to $1.35 per thousand. They took out homeless response services out of the mix of services that they were covering, and it passed. It passed 56 to 46, so literally a 20-point swing there in the course of about 6 months. And the way that they were able to do that, at least according to them, was that They had their mayor and council 100% engaged and in agreement and heading in the same direction. They had their unions and city employees engaged and headed in the same direction. They had their boards, commissions, and foundations. You are part of that mix. And they had their community organizations, from their social service agencies to their Chamber of Commerce and the Home Builders Association and the Realtors Association. All of those organizations came together and said, we do not want to see the city of Corrections services continue to erode. And they increased staffing in their police department, and they opened up a new fire station. They also retained 18 existing public safety positions with that levy. So I just think it's instructive as to, what does it take to get there? Should we want to head down that path? And I think, honestly, we have a long ways to go to have that sort of concurrence around what do we want to do. I think we're still very, very split on where we want to go and how we might want to get there. So here we are, between August and December of 2024, we've had the polling, we did the operations fee, or actually we're in the middle of looking at the operations fee, which is a fee that goes on your utility bill. Right now it's $15.76 for a residential property owner, and for a commercial business, it's about $75. That means the Amazon warehouse out in Mill Creek pays $75 a month for their operation fee. I pay $15. From an equity perspective, I think Amazon's probably more capable of paying more than $75 a month. So we're looking at that as part of our revenue conversation. Continuing the community education, update on the budget committee, preliminary direction on the revenue measure. At some point, city council is going to have to make a decision about whether or not to put a revenue measure on the ballot in May. In order to do that, they need to make a decision about that by the end of February. And we, of course, have 3 new city councilors coming on board in January, along with a new mayor. So, that's a really big lift for a new group of people. There will be a vacancy in Ward 6 as Councilor Hoy moves to the mayor's position. That seat will be vacant. It will be filled by election in May of 2022. So we are going to have 8 councilors for a period of almost six months. If we do decide to place a measure on the ballot, we'll go on May 20th. If we don't, then we are going to be adopting a budget that is substantially different than the one that we adopted last year. And last year we had to make cuts. So this year we'll likely be looking at some significant portion of that $17.6 million that I spoke about earlier. Just a couple other things that we have going on that you might be of interest. City Hall renovation, safety and readability bond that passed in 2022, which is a capital bond, can only be used for capital, not for operating. $300 million. We're funding a repair and seismic upgrade of Salem City Hall to the tune of almost $40 million. We're installing a new enterprise software system. Our enterprise software system is no longer supported by the vendor, which means that we need to get out of that system as soon as we can. We're looking at that replacement occurring over the next 2 years. We're taking on EMS transport, and we'll be doing that on July 1st. That's a good thing for the community, for the level of service, and also for our budget. That system should generate somewhere around $5 million in additional funding for the city's emergency response system. Downtown parking coming soon. We will be charging for downtown parking. Again, that's another source of revenue for downtown programs and services. And then I will skip other news and updates. And what questions do you have for me? Comments, feedback? What would you do if you were in my position? Welcome your thoughts.
I'll just ask a question. So, I mean, in terms of a redevelopment, perspective, you know, bringing new businesses into the city, that generate revenue for the city, what are some of the things that are most desirable to look for in a business, or, I mean, to attract businesses? And as you're looking at use of land, what are some of the most, or some of the best ways to, you know, bring in businesses that will bring revenues that support the city?
Well, the city's revenues aren't like tied to payroll. So, you know, from our perspective, although payroll is great from the larger economic development perspective, it doesn't do anything for the city's budget. So what adds to the city's budget is growing the ad valorem tax base. Last year, and you'll appreciate this, actually, I had a meeting with a team that was looking at a 5-acre parcel near the airport to put a battery farm on the parcel, literally 5 acres of batteries. It was going to be over $100 million in tax base, and the batteries don't call the police department or fire department, or, you know, at least not regularly. They don't demand any services. That was like, when I think about, wow, that's a lot of tax base in a very small area that's demanding very little of local government. Looking at the operations fee, looking at the franchise fees, how do we continue to support our government going forward? Those are the sort of things we're gonna have to look at. And we're also gonna have to look at, you know, what are we not gonna do? What are we gonna say no to?
On the revenue side, I know 20 years ago, we had a handshake deal between the jurisdictions. This problem shared with Marion County, Polk County, school district, city of Salem, etc., that they would pursue revenue requests on incremental years so that they don't overlap and demand simultaneously too much from the taxpayers, and a little more engagement with like Chamber of Commerce and some of the others. Don't know how Chemeketa turned out this year.
It failed.
But we really didn't see much engagement in that regard as well, to communicate the need, how the need would be, you know, felt by the public, really an engagement aspect. It's a comment,
Yeah,
it's a history, you know, what transpired in the last 20 years to dissolve that agreement, I don't.
I'm in regular conversation with the school district superintendent about their needs, our needs, and how they overlap or don't. So, you know, she understands where I am, we are. I understand where she is, they are, and you know, agree that both of us putting a levy on the ballot at the same time would probably be a guarantee that both of them would fail. You know, not that putting one on is by any stretch of the imagination likely to pass right now, but I think two would be just a guarantee. Good. All right, well, thank you for your time and attention, I appreciate it. Nice to meet you all. I'll stick around here for a while. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Linda.
Thanks so much, Keith. Thanks for coming out and sharing. I think it's really important, especially for us in the city and the times that we're having right now, for us to all be more aware of kind of how things work, looking at the agendas, the financial policies, and the more that we can get that information out, I think the better it is for everyone. So thanks again for coming out.
Thank you, Jeremy.
All right, Tori, what do we have next?
All right, so it'll be me because, so Chris Blackburn, he's developing in West Salem. He was going to be here and update the group on what the plans were for their development. I was trying to reach him by text while Keith was giving the update, so I haven't seen anything yet, so I'll just go ahead and do what I can. As most of you know, as you go through there, you're seeing, a lot of the development is happening around, Second Street. So as a result of the Second Street public investment, that would have been an obstacle to development, to all those old food processors that were through there. Rain Sweet was one of them, so we'll speak to that in the next agenda item. But a lot of that whole area was, blighted reason for the necessity of an urban renewal area. Rain Sweet in particular sat vacant for decades. So you're in the waiting room. That is right there.
Yeah, I did. My laptop may die, so I wanted to back up.
Yeah, okay, all right. So, Oregon fruit. I'll bring it up here on the screen so you can see the area of the group. I need to be able to share my screen.
Yeah.
So off Second Street, Oregon Fruit was there for a long time. Vacated, moved to Madrona, in Salem. Linda, can you please make me so I can share?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought we made you co-host.
So with that business being vacated for a long time too, it would have resulted in the same dilapidated state that Rain Sweet was. It was overly used. It was to a point where a lot of the building area was in disrepair, and there was a huge expense to bring it online so it could be usable. Manufacturing, most manufacturing now, aside from the businesses that are successful in Salem and continue to operate there, to get food processors specifically, we're having issues importing and getting their goods to process and then being able to get it to the market and export. So as a result, they relocated closer to I-5, which is good for the community. They stayed, retained the jobs here. But the downside to that was leaving these vacant buildings along Second Street. So by doing Second Street, we alleviated that development necessity that would have been triggered as a result of like a new entity coming in this case, like Chris Blackburn, coming in to say, I see a great opportunity for a market for whatever purposes these buildings would serve. But it's going to be very expensive just to bring those buildings online and be usable. So to also lift that public improvement of Second Street would have been that much more of a burden. So by, urban renewal, helping out with that, we have urban renewal grants too that help facilitate that transition of these buildings now to bring them online. Those mechanisms helped so that we didn't have a prolonged period of time where Oregon Fruit sat vacant. So to show you where it's specifically I'm talking about. So these are the areas that were the Oregon Fruit buildings off Second Street. And so what's happening now is a lot of these buildings being repurposed. That's where hearing from Pledge, and maybe we'll try to get him out to join us at a later date. Maybe he'll be able to share more on what the plans are, because right now a lot of the buildings that are being improved are being improved on the lower floor. So the intent there was to bring just a revenue source in, get those spaces leased up, and then over time, as there was more demand for higher density, potentially mixed use, residential, we have yet to see really a mixed use. There's some discussions, pre-applications about various locations of West Salem to be kind of a higher density, multifamily mixed use type building. But we have yet to see one realized, and I think that's where some of these developers, in this case Clutch, is kind of waiting to see, like, let's do what we can to shore up these buildings, get the ground floor leased up, and then as they gauge the market, they'll see about going vertical and adding additional space to those buildings. So, for example, this is what the development looks like now. As you go down Second Street, you'll see more in that same area that I showed on the map, where a lot of that redevelopment is happening as a result of the Second Street improvement. So you'll start to see these spaces filled in, and then over time, hopefully, you'll see additional density, additional services, potentially office or other uses in the buildings over time. Something else that this group was tied to was the vacationing of First Street. First Street ran through, the majority of First Street vacated as a result of the Goodwill development. So there's the remaining 1/3 piece that was just kind of like the buildings that were around there, just not being utilized, not to standard, really getting worn out. So the vacation was to create an alley through there, so the public access will improve. There's some vacant development sites over there, one of which is owned by Clutch. They have plans for that area. So when they go in to build there, they'll have to do some of the improvements. If you're familiar with First Street, there's quite a bit of a drop. The grade is not really conducive to the things, the buildings out there and what their plans are. So they'll have to do some improvements out there, but it won't be full street improvements. It won't, given the limited use and what surrounds it, there wasn't really a need for the wider street, typical street standard with offset sidewalks and street trees and lights and things like that. So by narrowing that, they'll be able to improve it, but have a lower cost obstacle to overcome when they develop those surrounding sites, with it being designated an alley. So hopefully I did Blackburn justice. I was kind of eager to hear, now that the First Street vacation has gone through, the city council had both the first and second reading, so it's all been recorded. I was wanting to hear, now that we got through that process, the timing. I don't know if you would have spoken to it, but I was eager to hear what would happen on First Street, and then future plans, how things are getting leased up with the former Order Fruit buildings, and then what their kind of later plans are on the horizon as far as potentially going higher density. So if he is available, then we'll do what we can to bring him back to the group and share that update. If you have any questions that you'd like me to convey to him in the meantime, let me know, because then I can just convey that to him, and I'll prepare to speak to him. So, okay.
I think the question that I'm most interested in that's germane to what we do is, what are the obstacles
To build.
And achieving a viable market?
Yeah.
Those are probably the two I'm most interested in.
I think that with Second Street and then the First Street vacation, I think we've been engaged. So I'm hoping that those things, also we have our grant program is just like the other programs, max of 300,000, but we work through exception criteria. Still have to go to the Urban Renewal Agency, but if we do have a native Clutch or with the next one, with the former Rain Suite, if there's an opportunity to do something significant out there and they meet the three criteria, the exception criteria to go beyond the 300,000, that's available too. So what happens is downtown specifically, they have this all the time. They have different exception criteria to meet, but that just allows it open, opens it up to around 750,000 potentially in grant funds to be a big project. So those hopefully will help, but I can help. I'll share that with them and see what else they might be encountering. Other questions? Want me to? Gives Chris.
Well, again, I guess my question, I'm looking at 3 different plans right here.
Oh, that's the next one. Yeah, so
Okay.
that'll be the next one. Yeah,
Right, okay.
All right, well, Tori, thanks again for covering that, and it's probably a perfect time. Do you want to just get into the next segment?
sure. So the next one is the old Rain Suite, and this is provided, so Jennifer Martin is the listing agent for the former Rain Suite on Bassett. So we have it in paper form, it'll be made available with the minutes, so it'll be to the group at a later date. And Jennifer Martin couldn't be here, she was out of town, so she provided their promotional material for the site. And so through there, it gives some of the background as far as the surrounding services and some of the demographics. It gets into the price, the listing price, and what the site entails. So on page 3 is where there are some development scenarios that they're entertaining. So that's something too this group was involved in, as far as to your point, Doug, is helping alleviate some of these burdens. So we were involved, your group was involved with additional exceptions to the grant material or grant program, bringing Second Street online, vacating First Street to make that easier to construct. And then also being able to do some of this work as far as repurposing the site and making this viable project, and also cleaning up the zone code. So that was another thing that we found before our Salem. The group made recommendations, and city council adopted zone changes that facilitated more uses in these areas. So both the zone code cleanup, removing overlays, and then working through the Our Salem to get the range of uses allowed out here, and that's what this speaks to with these different development scenarios that are the concepts that they're entertaining. So with mixed use, you can either go higher density with mixed use specifically in a building, or you can have a range of different uses, and that's kind of what they're reflecting on these different development concept scenarios. It's mixed use, retail, office, commercial, and in one case, multifamily, but more kind of like a townhome type development. So it's not, you're not necessarily going denser vertically. This is more side by side. So that page 3 has those concepts, and 4 just gets into that zone designation and how that helps. And that was one of the things as we were going through this over the years, with a lot of the manufacturing moving to state 5 locations, closer to Salem, off of Gilchrist, Madrona, Mill Creek, Kubler. Manufacturing was a hard fit to bring back. One, the building and the infrastructure weren't in West Salem to really accommodate that. So going through these efforts to work together to make it so that the things they were encountering as far as their plant obstacles were also the use issues, working through those things, being able to get this now to where it can be a variety of uses potentially. Hopefully that will result in, I think it helps visually. I know at the time with the vacant building sitting there, the intent was to show like imagine what it could be. I think that was a hard thing to overcome when you see what you have to overcome in a demolition. So by seeing that now completely opened up and basically like a blank slate, hopefully this will start to see some traction on it. The other slide, the other pages have just more context of the site, existing conditions. I think their website also has a drone, so if people are interested or if you wanted to share it, they have drone footage to show like the site more specifically. With the video. Any questions on the Rain Suite side?
All right, awesome. Well, and I think, yeah, we're just chugging right through this. Tori, thanks again, man. You're really stepping in. All right, so we're getting to the very end of this. We're looking for the latest from the West Salem organizations. I think the only thing I can really add is WSBA. We had our last meeting, I think it was last week, and we heard from Chris and Steve, who are running for Polk County Treasurer. That was a really interesting meeting. A lot of really big, probing, respectful questions, and yeah, it was a great agenda. And I think that's pretty much it for WSBA. Has anyone been to Neighborhood Association? Give a report on that. Anything else for the good of the cause? All right, if that's it. Thank you all for coming, and I wish you all a great week.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.